everybody, it's CrabMTG here, and today we have an extremely good, extremely fun Mogis God of Slaughter EDH deck tech. So, Mogis God of Slaughter is a 2-black red legendary enchantment creature, 7/5 god with indestructible. And as long as your devotion to black is less than 7, Mogis isn't a creature, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Mogis deals 2 damage to that player unless they sacrifice a creature. So, basically what this deck is group slug, dealing damage to everybody, make our opponents sacrifice stuff, discard cards, doubling up all the damage. It's really fun, just like hitting everybody for a bunch of damage and making everybody sacrifice a bunch of creatures. So, let's get into it. We've got some ramp with Soul Ring, Charcoal Diamond, Fire Diamond, and Guardian Idol. Charcoal Diamond enters taps for black, Fire Diamond enters taps and taps for red, Guardian Idol enters tapped and taps for colorless, but you can pay 2 and make it a 2/2 Golem artifact creature until end of turn. Then we have Mind Stone, which taps for colorless, but we can pay 1 and sacrifice it to draw a card. Prismatic Lens can add a colorless, and we can filter our mana with it. And then we have Rakdos Signet, which filters our mana and then can add both of our colors. So, for our enchantments, we have Reign of Gore, really just taxing for any life gain stuff. If a spell or ability would cause its controller to gain life, that player loses that much life instead. Very nasty. Then we have Smoke. No player may untap more than 1 creature during their untap phase. So this is really terrible for Voltron decks and creatures that like not Voltron decks, token decks. Really, really terrible for token decks because it only allows them to untap 1 of their creatures. But that's no problem for us because we're not winning through combat. We have Blood Moon, which makes all non-basic lands mountains. So all of our opponents' fancy dual lands just become plain old mountains. Then we have Citadel of Pain, which says at the beginning of each player's turn, Citadel of Pain deals X damage to that player, where X is the number of untapped lands they control. So it's basically dealing damage to people who like to cast up on other people's turns. So it's dealing damage to them for all their untapped lands at the end of their turn. Pain Magnification. Whenever an opponent is dealt 3 or more damage by a single source, that player discards a card, just being more mean when damage hits them. Phyrexian Arena, good for our card draw. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and lose a life. Rivalry, during each player's upkeep, if that player controls more lands than any other, Rivalry deals 2 damage to them, so this is really punishing for green decks. Spell Shock, 2 in red. Whenever a player successfully casts a spell, Spell Shock deals 2 damage to that player. So, basically dealing 2 damage for every spell a person casts, and that really can just gnaw our life totals very quickly. Sulfuric Vortex, 1 red for an enchantment at the beginning of each player's upkeep. Sulfuric Vortex deals 2 damage to that player, and prevents everybody from gaining life. Underworld Dreams, whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 1 life. Blood Reckoning, whenever a creature attacks you or plays over your control, that creature's controller loses 1 life. And Furnace of Wrath, which basically doubles up damage for anybody. Not you or anybody else, just everybody. Then we got Mana Barbs, which deals damage to a player when they tap a land for mana. Revenge of Ravens, whenever a creature attacks you, that creature's controller loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, so really, again, terrible for token decks. Spiteful Visions, 2 Rakdos, at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws a card. But whenever a player draws a card, Spiteful Vision deals 1 damage to that player. So, punishing for blue decks. Tainted Ether, very nasty card. 2 black enchantment. Whenever a creature comes into play, its controller sacrifices a creature or a land. So basically, you have to whenever any creature comes into play, their controller has to sacrifice it, or sacrifice a land, or another creature. It's not pleasant. Then we have Burning Sands, which is 3 red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, that creature's controller sacrifices a land. Shuts down completely any aristocrat style decks. Death Pits of Wrath, which is whenever a creature is dealt damage, destroy it. It can't be regenerated. So, even if 1 damage is dealt to a huge creature, that creature just dies. Dictate of the Twin Gods, it has Flash, and if a source would deal damage to a permanent player, it deals double that damage. So again, doubling up damage. Witch Hunt, players can't gain life at the beginning of your upkeep. Witch Hunt deals 4 damage to you. And then at the beginning of your end step, target opponent at random gains control of it. So this is again Chaotic Group Slug, just kind of smacking everyone in the face. And then of course we have the big boy enchantments with Fiery Emancipation. If a source you control will deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage instead. Havoc Festival, 4 black-red, players can't gain life, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses half of his or her life, rounded up. So, the clock has been set. Captive Audience, 5 black-red for enchantment. Whenever Captive Audience enters battlefield under target opponent control, and at the beginning of your upkeep, that opponent has to either make their life total become 4, then they have to discard their hand, and then they have to make each opponent creates 5 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Very nasty. And now we finally have our creatures with Rampaging Ferocity on. Players can't gain life, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. Viashino Heretic, we can pay 1 on a red and tap it to destroy an artifact, and it deals damage to that artifact's controller equal to that artifact's CMC. So just really mean to artifacts. Fanatic of Mogis. When it enters, it deals damage to each opponent equal to your devotion to red, and that could be quite a lot late game. Zozu the Punisher. Whenever land enters the battlefield, Zozu deals 2 damage to the land's controller. So again, slowly group slugging everybody whenever they play a land. Fate Unraveler, 3 and a black. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Fate Unraveler deals 1 damage to that player. That can really add up by the end of the game. Torbran, Thane of Red Fell. If a red source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent that player controls, instead he deals that much damage plus 2. So that's very nice. That'll kill our opponents before us. Archfiend of Depravity. 3 black for a 5/4 demon with flying. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player chooses up to 2 creatures he controls and then sacrifices the rest. Just so mean. Brash Taunter, 1/1 with Indestructible. When it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. And we can pay 2 and a red and tap it to fight another target creature. This is more damage dealing stuff. Heartless Hidetsugu, 3 red for a 4/3 legendary ogre shaman. We can tap it, and it deals damage to each player equal to the half of their life total, rounded down. So that's do quite a bit of damage, especially with Fire Emancipation. The game, I think, is be a draw. Comment down below if that's wrong, but I mean, Fire Emancipation is dealing triple. Everybody goes bye-bye. Sizan, Perverter of Truth. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses 2 life and draws 2 cards. So this really is very chaotic, making the game go a lot faster, very huggy, but then it's also draining our opponents for life, and it's fun. Indulgent Tormentor, 3 black for a 5/3 demon with flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card unless target opponent sacks a creature or pays 3 life. So that's pretty nice. Master of Cruelties. Very nice. First strike death touch, you can only attack alone, and when it attacks and isn't blocked, that defending player's life total becomes 1. And our damage dealers will totally wipe them out very quickly. And then it deals no damage. But, yeah, that's a great card. And then we got our spells with Earthquake. We can dump a bunch of mana into this, and it deals X damage to each creature without flying in each player. Killing Wave, for each creature, its controller sacrifices it unless they pay X life. Again, dumping mana into it. Dreadbore for removal. Smallpox, just very taxing everybody. Each player loses 1 life, discards a card, sacrifices a creature, and sacrifices a land. Terminate, more removal. Tyrant's Choice. Starting with us, each player votes for death or torture. If death gets more votes, each opponent sacrifices a creature. If torture gets more votes, or the vote is tied, each opponent loses 4 life. We got Death Cloud, which is X black, more dumping our mana into it. Each player loses X life, discards X cards, sacrifices X creatures, and sacrifices X lands. Pretty nasty if you ask me. Pox, very interesting card. Black, black, black for a sorcery. Each player loses a third of their life, discards a third of their hand, sacrifices a third of the creatures she controls, then sacrifices a third of their lands. Round each loss up. Very weird. A lot of math involved in that card. Ancient Craving, draw 3 cards, lose 3 life. Siphon Mind, each player discards a card. Each other player discards a card, and then you draw a card for each card discarded this way. So basically you're drawing 3 cards, and each opponent has to discard 1 card, which is pretty nice. Underrated card, I think. Fraying Omnipotence, each player loses half their life, then discards half their cards, then sacrifices half the creatures they control, and round up each time. Hour of Devastation, all creatures lose indestructible until end of turn. An Hour of Devastation deals 5 damage to each creature and each non-bolus planeswalker. A lot of damage. Deadly Tempest, destroy all creatures, board wipes, and then each player loses life equal to the number of the creatures they had that were destroyed. Decree of Pain, 6 black black, destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated, and you draw a card for each creature destroyed this way, and you can cycle it to make all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Curse of the Cabal, each player sacrifices all the permanents they control rounded down, but we can suspend it for 2 and pay 2 black black, and it says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if Cabal this thing is suspended, that player may sacrifice a permanent. If they do, put 2 time counters back on it. So, it's a very interesting card, I have to say. Blasphemous Act, 8 in a red. It costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield, and it deals 13 damage to each creature. Then we got some other cards that don't deserve the entire section. We've got Ob Nixilis, the Hate Twisted. Again, more damage dealing to opponents who draw cards, and we can -2 it to destroy target creature, and that controller draws 2 cards. Mind Crank, whenever an opponent loses life, that player puts that many cards from the top of his library into their graveyard. So, just extra mean when damage is dealt to them. God Pharaoh's Statue, 6 mana for a legendary artifact. Spells your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast. 2! And at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 1 life. Pretty nice. And finally, for the mana base, we've got Blackcleave Cliffs. I love that. Blackcleave Cliffs. Blackcleave Cliffs. When it enters the battlefield, tapped unless we control 2 or fewer of those other lands, and it can tap for either of our colors. Dragonstone Summon, it enters tapped unless we control a Swamper Mountain. It can tap for either of our colors. And Forbidding Ruins, when it enters, we can reveal a Swamper Mountain from our hand. But if we don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. Then we got Luxury Suite, it enters the battlefield untapped unless... Oh, other way, sorry. And it enters the battlefield tapped unless we have 2 or more opponents, and it can tap for either of our colors. And then we got Temple of Malice, which is the Scry Ram for Rakdos. And we've got 15 mountains and 17 swamps. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, all the good stuff. And I will see you next time.